Hi, this is Steve Farris from Mr. and you're listening to the Nothing Shocking podcast.
Want to know what's going on in the world of music? Then tune in to the Nothing Shocking podcast, a non-genre based, all ages friendly rock and roll program. Join us weekly for interviews with all your favorite rock stars from the mainstream to the underground. You can find us at nothingshocking.libsyn.com or anywhere you download podcasts.
We're putting the band back together.
The numbers all go to 11.
I'm talking about bands that rock. Led Zeppelin. What about Sabbath? AC/DC. Motorhead.
Does that mean it's louder? Isn't it any louder?
Well, it's one louder, isn't it?
We're not worthy. We're not worthy.
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
I get up off the ground and raise my head. Days like this, think I should be dead. One for Satan, two for me. Let's cheat the devil, it's fun, don't you agree?
Welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'm your co-host, Jeff Untied, and with me in Dog Bowl Studios is
Coach Nez.
You can find the Nothing Shocking podcast on Libsyn or any podcatchers. Like our Facebook page or follow us on Twitter at No Shock Pod.
You can also find the Nothing Shocking podcast on Rock Rage Radio every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. Central Time. Our sponsor is Ragged Records, located in downtown Rock Island, Illinois, and downtown Davenport, Iowa. We'd like to thank the Hong Kong Sleepover for allowing us to use their music for our intro and bumper ending. Tonight's guest is
Steve Farris, an original member of Mr.
Yeah, absolutely. He had quite the conversation with us discussing his new endeavors of conservation and wildlife.
Yeah.
And what, Mr. What did they do?
Well, recently they had one of the members had a birthday party and they got together and played together. They haven't done that in many, many, many years, and looks like they got recorded on Facebook. It's really cool. Check it out.
Yes. And so our fingers are crossed for a Mr. reunion tour, right?
Yeah.
All right, hey, let's get to the interview, man.
Good night.
Good night. Steve, welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'd like to introduce you my co-host, Jeff Untied.
Steve, thanks for joining us tonight.
Hey, it's good to be here, man. Good to be here.
Well, fantastic. Well, with the COVID-19 pandemic mitigations in the rearview mirror, I guess the question is, how did you keep yourself busy during the COVID lockdown?
Well, you got to understand something. I live very remotely out in the country on my ranch, and I work on wetlands and duck things and habitat. And the joke I had is like, social distancing, I've been doing that for about 12 years, so that was no big deal. My nearest neighbor is 3 miles away. He would ask what I was doing. I said, well, I'm on the excavator digging sloughs, making wetlands great again. It didn't really affect me out here the same as it did everybody else. Of course, when I go into town or whatever, it would. But, it affected everybody to some degree. Personally, I've had COVID 3 times. I've had it twice. My wife's had it 2 times. And onward and upward. So there.
Yeah, very good. Well, that kind of leads into the next question is, not only are you a musician, you've immersed yourself into the wildlife and wetlands restoration. How did a musician like you get involved into the conservation business?
I've been asked that question before, and I kind of turn around and say, how did a hunter like me from Nebraska would become a musician? But, strange things happen. I grew up along the Platte River in eastern Nebraska where my dad was a real outdoorsman and stuff. And so my passion for duck hunting and everything started when I was about 9 years old. Incidentally, the same year I started playing guitar, it was the same year I started playing ducks. Played ducks. Started calling ducks at age 9. And they've both been a huge part of my life all along. I always feel I'm very blessed for a number of things, obviously, but to have a later thing in life that I have a real passion for. So many of my friends that are doing music things have changed. I mean, a lot of the guys that were doing sessions and stuff like I was doing, that world has really changed since we were really doing a lot of it. And I've always felt blessed that I have something that I love just as much as guitar, doing something else. A lot of guys don't,
Oh, very good. Jeff, you got the next one?
Well, are there any groups that you work with for the restoration?
Well, it's interesting you say, but I mean, when I first bought some land in the year 2000, just because it was my fulfillment of the toy I wanted. We all say, well, I didn't want a Ferrari, I didn't want a house on the beach. I wanted some land, and when I found the land I really loved, of course, it was twice as big and twice as expensive as I could afford. Like everything you buy, you always fall in love with something you can't afford. So two things happened. Also, it didn't have any water on it or wetlands, and I'm a duck hunter. So two things happened. I had to learn how to make it into a business to make it make financial sense, but also I had to learn how to develop wetlands and all. And I didn't, this is like God leading me into a second part of life. I say that over and over in interviews and resumes, but I just wanted a toy. I didn't see either of this coming at all, particularly the creative outlet. And so that's been the real amazing thing about this. When I first got started, to answer your question, which I haven't yet, but I got involved with Fish and Wildlife Service and an organization called Ducks Unlimited, and that state organization, the Grass Game and Parks, and I partnered with them. We all put in funds and got involved, and I even was somewhat involved in the design of the first phase of it, and I worked with these guys for 2 weeks, and when they left, I called a company and rented a dozer and an excavator and have been doing it ever since myself. And incidentally, then in 2009, I was hired by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to go to Oregon and design and develop a 25-acre riparian wetland for them. So it's kind of interesting how it all turns around.
Oh,
yeah, very cool.
Very good. You've hosted multiple hunting shows on TV and various cable networks. Can you give our listeners an insight on your hunting programs, and can they be found on syndication, or where can they be found at today?
Well, I'm the idiot when it comes to technology and finding anything. So I don't really know. I fell into this deal because I was at a Ducks Unlimited banquet, and I met a guy named Chris Dorsey who had a production company that did a lot of those shows back for a while, and asked me if I wanted to host a show, and one thing led to another. Again, it wasn't something I set out to do. They'd send me around the world, and I'd film hunting shows, and it was fun and all that stuff. So about 10 years I did it. I imagine you could go find them somewhere. At the time we were doing them, I would say that was from 2006 to 2017 or so. Mm-hmm. There were channels on the TV, on cable of the Outdoor Channel, and there were 3 or 4 of them. I'm trying to think what they all were, but I don't know if they're even around now. I really don't. But they're fun to do and fun to go around the world and do some different things and see some different places, So
fantastic. Jeff, you got the next one?
Well, yeah. Recently, you posted a video on Facebook with rejoining your guys in Mr. and the Broken Wing song, a live recording. That was pretty cool. Can you talk a little bit about that experience?
Well, it was a great experience. I mean, I left the band, I think it was 1988. We haven't played together, the 4 of us, since then. Yeah. And in, I don't know, maybe January or February, Richard Page's wife called me and said, "Hey, Rich just turned 70. We want to maybe have a birthday party. Guys in Mr. come out." I said, "Sure." And then that turned into, "Hey, maybe let's learn a few songs and play a few songs in the living room." "Yeah, sure." And then that turned into a set list of about 12. And I had to go back and relearn all my parts from songs. I was learning parts off the I was Face record, man. I haven't played that stuff in a long fucking time. But anyway, so I went back and learned these things and went out there. This was 2 weeks ago or so, and saw the guys. I mean, I guess I've seen every one of them once or twice since the Mr. Mystery somewhere. We were across paths, but hadn't worked together. As a matter of fact, I saw Rich when he was with the Ringo's All-Stars in 2016. Yes. But anyway, we just went to the studio. That was the other thing. We went from the living room to an actual studio. We went over there and it was a small party. Just the guys from the band and their wives and Richard's grown children and our manager and girlfriend, just a little group. And we just played songs and drank and ate and had a good time. And, it was really, really good, man. I mean, just for me speaking, it was really good for my soul, to be honest with you. Nothing to it. I mean, any battles we used to have about what we wanted to be when we grew up and all that kind of stuff are so far behind us. And they're my brothers. I love them. We did the greatest thing that people maybe will ever do, have a band that has hits and
Yeah.
has success, and just great to go back and be around him. I mean, it was like so natural, man. I mean, it's like falling off a log, just playing like, I mean, and I wrote somewhere, I said, this is the best band I've ever been in, and I've been in a lot of them, and that's true. I played with the greatest musicians in the world, somewhere along the line. And that band just had a magic from the first time we got together, and it just was like going home. Man. It was freaking great.
Oh, so cool.
Yeah.
Well, it wouldn't behoove us if we didn't bring up Welcome to the Real World, the album. It's a landmark album, and at the time of when you and the rest of the band were in the studio creating that album, did you kind of have a feeling that you were onto something special?
Yeah, man. I mean, well, I don't know if I'd say it just from that record. When we were putting the band together, I just gotten off the road with Eddie Money, and I was calling around looking through the Rolodex, and I happened to know the manager, George Giz. He'd managed the Pages. And I was looking for a gig, and anyway, I'll try to speed this up. We got together, and I hit it off with the guys. It took us a while longer to find Pat. But, I mean, I was in a moment in my career where I was starting to turn down gigs, you know. Well, I mean, one was Kenny Loggins, who asked me to play with him, and he knew these guys because Rich and Steve had sung backgrounds on him, and I got together with him, played with him at his house and stuff, and he said, you know, will you go on the road? I said, Scott, I don't know, man. This thing something's going on with this band. And I think Ken's quote was, look, I'm not asking you to marry me, just I want you to go on the road for a minute. But I said, man, I just got to stick around and see what this is going to be. And I was also, at the same time, I was doing a record with Eddie Money, Where's the Party? So I was going down and working with Tom Dowd down at the record plant. And then I'd leave there to go do something with Mr. at night. We'd doing a showcase or two. But that was the time that I really thought, this is freaking something, man. This is a different deal. So when we did the first record, it was I Wear the Face was a lot of songs that Rich and Steve had already written. And then we put our twist on it and came up with parts and did the whole thing. And Peter McKeon from Men at Work was involved from the get-go and said he would produce the record, which was, of course, key in getting the record deal. He had just sold 14 million albums and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, we did the record. Now, that record did not do that well, and I don't think any of us were totally happy with how it turned out, but nonetheless. There's that precipice where you're standing there in the record company in a deal, for those of you that have had one back in those days, it would be probably a 7-record deal. There'd be one record, then with an option to pick up the next 2, and an option to pick up the next 2, and then an option to pick up that, meaning the record company can get ready to be after the first record or after the 3rd record or after the 5th record. Anyway, Paul Atkinson was our A&R guy, and he allowed us to go in the studio for the 2nd record with ourselves, just produced ourselves after finding an engineer, and we went and found Paul DeVilliers, who was mixing Yes live. We went down to see him at Irvine Meadows, and he was crazy good live mixer. And we hooked up with him, and they gave us a budget to go in and cut X amount of time and see how it went. Broken Wings was one of those first 4 songs we cut, and they loved it and let us keep going. So that record was really the start of the band really being a band in total, because we were all collaborating on all the writing. We all had a lot to say about everything about it and just went with our gut on everything, because particularly Rich and Steve had done a million sessions. Pat and I had done some, but we've been in the studio a lot. We weren't like new to this. And so we had a lot of, they gave us a lot of leeway to go about what we wanted to do. And I mean, all the way down to what we wanted to wear, everything. And I mean, I'd literally stay in the studio with Nick Gosowski and mixing. I stayed there the whole time just mixing everything. Just if I had anything to say, I thought I'd better say it then, not after the record's done. And it was just like this really involved thing. And we felt good about it. But I mean, I'm giving a long answer. I hope that's okay.
That's okay.
You know, we're trying to figure out what the first single is. And we're making that record. One time it was going to be Don't Slow Down. Another time it was going to be Uniform of Youth. Another time it was going to be this or that. Anyway, I can't remember. There was a moment when the record company was picking a single that we didn't think should be the first single. And so Richard Page and George Giz, our manager, went down to have a meeting with that time president of RCA, Jose Menendez, famously murdered by his kids later. But anyway, Jose was our champion at RCA at the time. And they went down. We had a group. So we need to unify and decide what we wanted to single. We all decided it was going to be Black White, first song, first side. Black White's going to be a single. Go down and fight for Black White. And came back, how'd it go? What's the first single? Broken Wings. What? Anyway, Rich, I mean, man, we just told the story again 2 weeks ago. It's funny because we're recapping all the stuff as we were giving toasts to each other. But, when it came back and he said, they were arguing about this or that, and Jose Mendez looks at Rich, and he had that Cuban accent. He goes, Rich, what is the best song on the album? He goes, Broken Wings. He goes, that's our first single. That was the end of it. So that's a great thing because the president of the record company has a stake in what the decision was. So I think that even helped because it took a while to get Broken Wings over the top. It was released in AOR, Al Moriana Rock. I don't know if these formats exist anymore. And that kind of did okay. And I remember I'd gone to do a record with Barry Gibb down in Miami. I was gone, booked for 6 weeks down there, and then I got a call. Broken Wings had been released as CHR format, contemporary hit radio for top 40. Anyway, and it was climbing the charts, 5 to 10 points a week. And next thing you know, Tina Turner wants to stay open for her. And I had to fly back early and send in a friend of mine, Kevin Dukes from Billy Joel's band, went and filled in for me with Barry's thing. And I came back, started rehearsing. And then the climb was on, man. We started opening for Tina, and it was just one thing after another. I'll tell you one real quick thing. You've seen the movie Spinal Tap, I'm sure. Right?
Yeah, of course.
So, and when, I'm trying to think. He was the musical director of David Letterman. What's his name?
Paul Schaefer.
Yeah, Paul Schaefer.
Yeah. Paul Schaefer's playing Artie Fufkin in Spinal Tap. And anyway, they go to some record signing thing at some department store, and nobody shows up. That's exactly like what it was for the first album, Mr. Miss. We did a lot of those things. So there's nobody that shows up, and you're parked on a table in front of some makeup section in Nordstrom or something. It's so fucked up you can't even believe it. Anyway, and a limo takes you there, which is even worse. Really, your limo drops you off to nothing. Well, so we're out on the road with Tina, and we're a few weeks into it. We go to some record signing in Knoxville, Tennessee. I'll never forget this one because Knoxville, Tennessee. We're in the limo. We drive to a record store, and there's a line 4 blocks long of girls waiting to sign autographs. And we looked at each other and said, fuck me, man. Check this out. So, we go in there. We're at the table. Girls are crying when they walk by, and I thought, oh, shit, this has ever changed.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, so cool.
I guess I was just going to ask you about, because you had, you mentioned opening for Tina, and you guys had some pretty big acts that you opened for, Don Henley, the Bangles. Did you guys ever record any of the material?
Now, wait a minute. We didn't open for the Bangles. Bangles opened for us.
Oh, okay. But, I mean, did you guys ever...
Our headlining tour. Come on.
Yeah. Did you guys ever record any of the shows? Or is there any live material out there that will ever be released?
Oh, I mean, there's probably recordings of stuff all over the place, but in terms of legit multi-track recordings, I don't remember that we did much of that. We might have, man. I can hardly remember. You just do things all the time. I wouldn't know about any release of any of that stuff.
Okay.
If we would have done it, it probably would have been when we were headlining. Bangles opening for us, headlining. I don't know. We used to listen to board tapes, meaning it was cassette format back then. Just cassettes you take and listen. And a lot of times I always like to slide better than I like this in the studio. Not knocking our studio, but we just seem to gel, longer into the song, longer on the road, and it just seemed to have stronger grooves and that kind of shit. So sometimes I really like the live stuff more than the studio stuff, really.
Oh, so cool.
Yeah.
All right, so change a little gears on you here. So many rock and roll fans maybe don't realize your contributions on the Creatures of the Night album by Kiss. The rumor that Eddie Van Halen was petitioning for you to be the replacement for Ace Frehley. Can you kind of talk a little bit more about this whole experience?
Well, that's somewhat true. That I played on it, certainly. This solo, man, has more life than ever because I've done about 4 interviews about that solo in the last 3 years. I cut it in 1982, pre-Mr., but I was playing in an original band called the Mambo Jets down at the Blue Lagoon Saloon in Marina del Rey. And I get off the stage, and some guy comes up to me and starts talking to me and asks me if I want to audition for Kiss. And I'm thinking, I eat Campbell soup every night. My Volkswagen Rav won't start unless I push it. Why would I want to audition for Kiss? But anyway, so he asked me to go down to an office, make a tape, go down to an office. I go down there and I make this tape with everything I could think of that I've ever played, whether it be a cassette of a bar in Iowa to some demo or whatever. And I play it and I don't think anything of it, but I mean, she didn't think anything of it. I played in front of this girl and it was like, I mean, I just, one of those things where she didn't look very impressed. I left and didn't think twice about it. And 2 weeks later, I get a phone call and says, "Hey, is this Steve Farris?" "Yes." "This is Paul Stanley from Kiss. Gene and I really like your tape. I don't know if you want to come to the record plant tomorrow. We're kind of having guys play on the record, see how it goes." And I said, "Yes, of course." So they said, "Come on down tomorrow at 2:00. I went down there. I remember walking through the record plant, and I'd been in there but late at night when I had free time or something. Now I'm in the middle of the day. Tom Petty walks out of one room and goes into another. Luther Vandross is talking on a payphone, and somebody else in another studio. I go back to Studio D and look through the glass windows and hear two tall guys with black hair that are obviously Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons, but you've never seen them without makeup.
Yeah,
right.
And they're sitting there with an engineer and some guy playing guitar. And I walk in and say hi and say, "Hey, man, can you sit out here in the hallway till we're ready? We're listening to another guy." I waited about 3 hours while they listened to this other guy and just kind of biding my time. And they finally walks out and he goes, "Hey, man, this is Bob Tulick." I go, "Hey, Bob." So I met Bob at that moment. And then I walked in and Paul said, "I got a Marshall in the other room. Here's a chord, songs in G. It's an 8-bar solo. We'll scroll you up the bridge and I'll count you in." I go, and at that time, I wanted to be a studio hotshot. I was working hard at being, a guy walk in and nail it, all that shit. So they play it up and he signals me visually 1, 2, 3, 4. I play a solo and they go, "Give him another track." And I play another take and they stop the tape and Gene goes, "Will you dye your hair black?" I go, "Yep." He goes, "Can you wear high heels?" I said, "I'll give it a try." He said, "Fuck me, don't cut your hair, don't do anything." Anyway, they went nuts over that solo. And so for about 2 weeks, it looked like I was going to be the replacement of Ace Frehley and Kiss. Now,
wow.
Here's how the story goes. I'll get back to the Eddie Van Halen part. But so after a week or so, they said, "Let's go play live and set up at SIR and play like a band." Now, I need to backtrack. One of the first things I ever got when I got to LA in 1979 is I met this band Player. They had a song called "Baby Come Back." You hear it on the Swiffer commercials now, right? "Baby Come Back," the song. So I meet these guys. I auditioned for them because they'd lost their singer. They go nuts for me. I play with them for a month, and then the manager comes down to rehearsal and reminds them that the guy that lost is one of the lead singers, and I have to be able to sing lead. Well, I don't sing lead. Needless to say, I lost that gig, which really crushed me at the time. It was early on in L.A. Now, years later, Kiss, they say, we're set up, and they go, "We got to hear you sing." I go, I think, "Fuck me, you kidding me?" So, I mean, I'm thinking it's fucking over. So anyway, and Paul's going, "No, man, I didn't think I could sing either." And I was like, man, anyway. So it's one of those moments when you go, look, I'm either going to freaking sing and see if I get this gig, or I'm not singing and going home and I don't get the gig. You know what I mean? Yeah. So you're like, fuck it, I'm singing, man. So I have the dubious distinction of having sung Honky Tonk Woman with Kiss with me singing lead vocal. If I had a fucking video of anything, I wish it was that. Yeah. So, wow. I mean, so I play with them, and that's it, man. I go home, I don't hear from them again. 2 weeks later, Paul Stanley calls me. He goes, "Hey, man, we don't think you're the right guy for the band, but we love your playing. We want to hire you to do sessions," which they did. Now, as time goes on, I get to know Paul and Gene. I mean, Paul's mentioned me in his autobiography. People sent me things when he's teaching an art class. He gives me all this credit. We actually, after I saw him on the American Music Awards, we ran around for a period of time, became old buddies after Mr. happened. And he told me the story, and he's told me this more than once, as has Gene. They were friends with Eddie Van Halen because they used to, I think Van Halen used to open for them before Van Halen became huge. Mm-hmm. And they were friends, and Eddie came down to the studio, and they played that solo for him. And I think his quote was, "What the fuck's wrong with that guy?" So that's what we know. So he liked it. I liked that compliment. I actually played with Eddie later on. I didn't bring that up, but I played with Eddie to introduce his 5150 amps stuff and hung out with him. But I never mentioned the Kiss thing to him.
Oh, so cool. What a great story. So I definitely want to talk a little bit about in 79, you joining forces with Eddie Money. You did that for 3 years. Can you give our listeners?
No. I got to LA in 79, but I was in Eddie's band in 82. I went on the road with him in 82 and did a 6-month tour. Came back, and then we started Mr. at the beginning of 83. I was working on the Where's the Party album with Eddie. That's where I met Tom Dowd, which was the great things about the records. Tom, legend producer, who I looked up to over and over and over, used to hire me for sessions. It was great connection, I think, to be one of the real geniuses in record making, So.
Can you kind of give our listeners an insight on working with Eddie Money? How was what was it like getting in the studio and recording material with him?
Eddie, to talk about Eddie, you want to. You have a love for Eddie. Eddie is funny. Also, I hate to say it, but I always feel like if you look at the term knucklehead in the dictionary, there's a picture of Eddie next to it. But I love it. But you love it because he's kind of a funny dude. He was a Long Island guy, and I mean, he's just a character. I'll tell you an Eddie Money story that I love. This wasn't when I was playing with him. It was years later. Years later. As a matter of fact, he was working in a studio with my friend Kim Bullard recording something. And Eddie lives the dream so consistently that he gets on the phone to call for Domino's Pizza, and he calls directory assistance. And the directory assistance operator gets on the phone and he goes, "Yeah, this is the money man. Give me Domino's." He's telling her that it's Eddie Money. You know what I mean? This is how Eddie operates. So if that says anything about Eddie,
That's awesome.
To work with him, for me, it was great because it was the first name gig I'd ever done.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, I didn't get that gig either at first. I went down and played for him. He wasn't there. I played for his band, and Ralph Carter was the bass player kind of running the thing. And I went over to Playa del Rey, went over to this rehearsal studio, and I didn't know any of his tunes. I just showed up, and they were telling me the changes of the tunes, and I play them, and solo here, solo there, I play that. And they were impressed, and that's, of course, what I wanted to be, a guy that could come in not knowing something and play and nail it, So they called Eddie, and he flew down from San Francisco. Meantime, his management is already calling me to negotiate my weekly salary. Now, I had a friend named Alan Pasqua who got me the audition for Eddie and had played keys with Eddie before and was kind of a mentor to me and kind of a 5'6" tough New Jersey guy. 5'6" and 130 pounds. I'm not talking about a big guy, but just a New Jersey attitude and a good friend.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "They're going to try to screw you. They're going to try to screw you. Hold out for money." Now, here's the great thing. They were offering me $600 a week, and I was holding out for $625. And I wasn't going to budge, man. So anyway, Eddie got in there and sort of didn't like me from the get-go. It was like, it's obvious. If I was visually with you right now, I'd show you when I was introduced. He shakes, "Hey, Steve Farris, Steve Eddie," and he shakes my hand while looking the other way. I said, "Yeah, nice to meet you." And so anyway, so that's Eddie. And then he goes, "Hey, let's play such and such." He named some song I don't know. I go, "I don't know it, but I can learn." He goes, "Okay, do you know such and such?" I didn't know that either. I go, "No, but I can learn it." He goes, "What songs do you know?" I said, "I don't know many. I can learn all of them, though." And he goes, "Well, why don't you come down tomorrow morning?" I said, "Well, I can't because I have a session." God, he fucking hated me. And so anyway, I played that day with him, and I went home, and I talked to the keyboard player on the phone. I knew who I knew, and I said, "I didn't get the gig." He said, "No, I was hiring the other guy." Some guy came in, I don't know who it was, but knew every one of Eddie's songs from since Christ was a corporal. He knew every freaking song. So anyway, and of course that went over Eddie. Now, so they played for about 6 or 7 days. Then they got a call back, said, "This guy's not good enough. Come back, learn X, Y, and Z, and come back on audition." I did, and I got the gig. But I played that whole gig with Eddie not liking me. And I could say this live on an interview because he told me that. Eddie would tell me that. "I never liked you, man." I said, "Okay, great." I just kept playing with him. And then later on, the beauty of this ending is that by the time we're playing and it goes on, we're done, then we're doing the next album, and I'm coming up with parts for the record where he's copying, seeing my value, I guess.
Mm.
And then I announced to him that I can't go on the road with him because we're getting a record deal in RCA with Mr. Got his management came and started offering me a piece of the door, more money for everything. I thought, geez, I should have tried this a long time ago. But anyway, so that's how it went with Eddie. And then I ended up playing on a record for him years later when Keith Olsen was producing. They had no idea that I'd ever played with Eddie, and I showed up to sessions for Eddie. But I mean, Eddie was Eddie, man. He was consistent, man. He was a rock star, lived it, man, all the time. I mean, whether I have jokes about him or not, he was like, I saw him in church, man. I'm Catholic. I went to Catholic St. Mel's in Woodland Hills. I go in there one day, and here's Eddie Money sitting in a pew with his newer wife. I hadn't met her, and all his kids. And I walk up behind him. I lean up there and said, "Eddie," and he looks at me and goes, "Steve-o, what are you doing here?" And I thought, what am I doing here? But anyway.
So cool.
Yeah.
Jeff, you got the next one?
Well, yeah, in 1985, Mr. played on Saturday Night Live. Do you have a story from that experience?
Man, those were the great days, obviously, because Broken Wings went number one, I think, a week before that. It was like Thanksgiving time when Broken Wings went number one. And Tina was sending over champagne, and we spent Thanksgiving with her and her crew, and everything was going great. And then we did the video for Kyrie in Hollywood, Florida, on the same venue we had just played the night before with Tina. We kept the setup just to do a video, and then we ended up in New York to go Saturday Night Live. I mean, things were just happening, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just exploding. And so I do remember this about Saturday Night Live. NBC made the mistake of saying, if any of you guys want to take the NBC limo out afterwards, you can. Now, me being the only single guy in Mr. I just remember my best friend to this day, all my life, was practicing law in New York City at the time. So he shows up at the taping of the actual show, Saturday Night Live. Of course, he's suit and tie. Just came from a Wall Street gig. And then we hop in the NBC limo with my guitar roadie, who's an Australian crazy man. And so we hop in the NBC limo, and we just start going around all the clubs in New York, and it seemed like at every club we went to, we gathered another human being or two or three in the limo. So it was, by the end, it was like 25 people in the limo going everywhere. And I just remember the sun coming up and taking me my buddy, JB, over to drop him off at his office because he doesn't have time to go home again. And he just tightens up his tie and walks into his Wall Street office. But those were great days, man. Those were great days.
Nice. Awesome. Well, in 1997, you joined Whitesnake. Wait, I guess this was the touring version of the band. Is that correct?
Yeah, I didn't do any recording with them. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about the experience of on the road with Whitesnake and David Coverdale and what you Tony Franklin and Derek Hillen was also in that band, correct?
Yeah. Who did you say the last one?
Derek Hillen on keys.
Oh yeah, Derek Hillen.
Yeah.
Funny man, I talked to Derek on the phone about 3 weeks ago. That's funny you'd say that. He called. He was sitting there with Dave Amato from REO, who gives me too much credit for getting gigs. But anyway, they called me, and I hadn't talked to Derek since fucking Whitesnake. But anyway, back to Whitesnake. Marco Mendoza was going to play bass on that tour, and I knew Marco, and he hooked me up with it. And I had a meeting with. I'd met David Coverdale one time. I was in Mr. and he was with Tawny Katane. I met him at a clothing store called Traffic. We bullshitted. That's all I knew of David. But anyway, I had a tape of some original stuff I'd been doing. I had just gotten back from an Italian artist named Eros Ramazzotti. I was living in Italy for a short period of time working for him. But anyway, I came back and I had a tape of some instrumental stuff, and it got sent up to David. He loved it. He flew down. We went to famous place in Hollywood. Doesn't matter. I can't think of it right now. But anyway, we went out to eat there, and Coverdale and I. So, I mean, his meeting with me, his audition with me, I think is Steve wanted to hang out with me. We had a good dinner and drank and talked bullshitted for a long time. And so I started. I mean, Marco did not make the gig. In fact, I think it was his father got ill and he had to stay back. Marco ended up playing with Whitesnake later, but not on that tour. So Tony was on the tour. A great bass player. So Franklin and me and Denny Carmassi and Adrian Vandenberg and Hillen for that band. And I had just gotten married. And so, I mean, and I also ripped my medial collateral ligament on my wedding night. And that's another story for another interview. But anyway, I ended up going up with a brace on and we went up. David lives in Lake Tahoe, or I'm trying to think, right near Lake Tahoe. Yeah, anyway. And we rehearsed at Calneva, the old sort of 40s Frank Sinatra club. We rehearsed there for 3 weeks and in a brace, whatever, then went on the road. David and I got on great. He was really nice to me, man. He was really, really good to me. As a matter of fact, he kind of keeps himself a bit. He has an assistant. Mikey was his name. I don't know if that's still his assistant, but we went to Japan was the first place we went to, and Coverdale called me a lot, and I'd go to dinner with him or whatever and hang out. I was in a great relationship with Dave. I mean, on the writer, they'd ask you what you want backstage, and I was saying, oh, man, I'm easy with nothing. And they said, well, wait a minute, I want a bottle of Lagavulin single malt, which, by the way, I'm drinking right now. Lagavulin single malt and 4 Cuban cigars. And so they said, we'll see what we can do. So I got that. And Lagavulin single malt, I don't know if you guys are Scotch drinkers, but Lagavulin is very smoky and peaty in taste.
Nice.
And so Coverdale, I'd have my guitar roadie. He'd always have glass for me over by my guitar rack, and I famously like to drink scotch when I play guitar. But anyway, so I'd be over there, and Cover every now and then he has that low English voice. Stephen was here. Stephen. Or Stephen Dahl, he'd say, Stephen Dahl, give me a taste of the smoke. And then I'd have to give him a little sip of my scotch, So
Wait, that band was so, such great players in that band. It's too bad you guys didn't make one album.
Yeah, I don't know. That tour was called the Last Hurrah Tour, which I always love. Artists always do this. It's the final tour.
Yeah.
Of course, he's been touring ever since, and that was 1997.
Yeah.
But, there's always that little pitch. That was the last hurrah. Going out again. I came back. I don't know what I did after that. I'm trying to think what the hell I did after Whitesnake. Who knows what I did? I was just playing sessions or whatever I was doing. And, and then he went out with the next group of guys, and he's been out since.
Yep. Well, I have one more question for you, and then we'll leave you alone for the evening. This question to all of our guests. The mystery and mystique of rock and roll is no longer a thing. It doesn't appear to be a thing anymore with the dawning of social medias and the internet and what have you.
Right.
For you as the musician, the artist, and the fan, which do you prefer? Do you miss the mystique and mystery of rock and roll, or do you like this new age of accessibility? Because if we didn't have the internet, we wouldn't be doing this with you tonight.
Yeah, you wouldn't be doing this. We'd be doing it differently while we're on the road. We'd be in person with you. We did 5 million of those. It'd be different. You're right. When I was, when I was a kid, I'd go buy records at the record store because of what the album cover looked like.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'd filter through them. It's funny. I'm going to tell you a story. There's a guy named Greg Fernholz. He was the singer in my band in high school. I had a band called Dog Breath, later named Fancy Jack. But anyway, Greg, when he was 2 years older than me, and he went off to college in Lincoln at Nebraska University. But anyway, he would go to this record store, and he'd bring back these records for us to learn. I said to Greg, I'm talking about as recently as 2 weeks ago. I hadn't talked to this guy in 30 years. He called. But anyway, I said, you should have been an A&R guy, because I remember Greg would find these records. One was by a band called Aerosmith. Another band was called ZZ Top. Mm-hmm. Another was called Kiss. I mean, these were records that nobody had heard of these guys. And we started playing their stuff in high school. And obviously these have become the iconic bands, a lot of them. Black Oak, Arkansas, all these different bands. But anyway, Foghat, another one. But anyway, the mystique was, you would go to a concert. I grew up in a small town in eastern Nebraska, and the larger towns were Omaha or Lincoln, and that's if there's a concert, they're going to be there, and they weren't every night. I mean, there might be one a month. And so, if somebody was playing there, you probably went because it was something to go to. I mean, it was a big deal. I mean, to go see Alice Cooper with just the awe of like, oh my God, it's actually Alice Cooper in person. Mm-hmm. It's almost frightening. It was so big, And yeah, you don't have that deal anymore. I mean, people, and that's been for a while. That's been for a while. It's not just the latest form of social media. It's just gradually watered down to accessibility. It was, and I think that's just part of, civilization.
Sure.
I mean, really. I mean, we weren't taking the covered wagons to the concerts. We get the idea. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
What do I like better? Yeah. I didn't answer that part of it.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I don't know. I mean, again, the bands were larger than life back then. Mm-hmm. That made them really something special. I mean, a very, very dear friend of mine is Gary Wright, the guy at Dreamweaver.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And much older, and of course had success with Spooky Tooth in the late 60s and 70s. And then he had, his hits, Dreamweaver and Our Love's Live in the mid-70s. And he used to tell me, he said, you really missed it, man. He said, the 70s one, it was really great. And I've been around Ray Parker Jr., another session player, said that to me, man, the 70s one when you really wanted to be here. So bit by bit, it has changed. Now, having said all that, it's kind of nice to sit here in my house and do an interview with you and say real things to people. Sure. So it has its own impact for fans, I mean, we played on the Broken Wings thing you talked about a couple weeks ago. If you see that, that's an iPhone video.
Yes.
Yeah. And my wife was iPhone. She's videoing. Everybody's wives are. The one you're seeing on the Mr. thing, that was George, our manager's, his angle. That's why there's a music stand in front of me. Mm. But anyway, that's just an iPhone video. And so it goes on, and we get first day or something, it's like 86,000 hits, you know?
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. I mean, I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means we go play some dates or not. I've been talking to friends about this. I said, it'd be fun to go play some stuff.
Yes.
Of course, when you look at the world and it's 86,000 people across the world, it might only be 3 of them in Chicago, so you might necessarily see some Chicago. You know what I mean? You got to fucking do the math eventually. Right. You know what I mean?
Right.
But you know, it'd be fun. I said to somebody today, I said, yeah, I'd like to go do it if it's the right time of the year that I don't have hunting obligations or something. And it'd be wonderful, man. I'd love to go play. I said, the only thing I want to make sure of is that we don't come back from it and all get assessed $50,000 for the losses. You know what I mean? So, I mean, it costs money to go on the road, so you got to sell some seats. You know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Would you guys ever think that you'd entertain something like doing like a weekend warrior? You know, those fly out dates.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know, man. I mean, would I? Yeah, I would. There were some interesting things said while we were there with each other. You know, I mean, Rich kept saying, just think what it sounded like we rehearsed. He said that 4 times to me, probably. And I'm like, thinking, well, what are you thinking, Rich? You know, I don't know. I think it'd be fun. I think we'd all like doing it. I do. Slug, well, Steve George, affectionately known as Slug. You know, I hadn't seen Slug in a long time, and he's kind of really retired. He seemed really, man, he's just like he was just so kind of upbeat about us getting together and everything. It was just kind of really cool. You know, Pat's really busy all the time. He's always stayed busy. He was in King Crimson.
Mm-hmm.
He's out with Stickman now, 2011. So, I mean, he's just always doing shit.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, for us, I'm not doing any music. Slug isn't doing any music. Rich has done some. But I got to tell you, I wouldn't really want to go on the road with anybody. I wouldn't. I don't think I'd be interested in any of that except for Mr. Because to me, that's like home. That's our band. That's us. We can play it better than everybody else can play it.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely.
And so it's like, and we played those songs 2 weeks ago, and I'm like, yeah, I made a few fucking mistakes, of course, because I couldn't remember what the bridge was or something. But still, you're like playing and going, man, it sounds like how they've always sounded. You know, there you are. Rich sings like a bird. Everybody plays great. It's a great band.
Well,
fucking great band.
When you guys decide to do this, you make sure you hit me up, and we want to. We want you to announce it on the Nothing Shocking podcast deal.
Yeah, we would. Hey, by the way, one thing I didn't mention to you, I was going to mention, and I saw you're in Rock Island, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you know this, but I lived in Iowa City 4 years before I went to LA. I went to music school there for a semester, and I played the Quad Cities, all that shit.
Oh, cool.
Muscatine, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You do know the
You're
area.
neck of the woods, bro.
Yeah,
absolutely.
No, I was in that area. So.
Oh, nice. So cool.
We played Rockford, Illinois once a month. We played, I mean, that whole thing, that was me, man. So,
very cool.
Small world, isn't it?
It is a small world.
Yeah.
I meant to say that.
Oh, fantastic. All right, so we're out of our allotted time for the evening. Is there anything that we left off tonight that you would like to cover?
No.
Perfect.
I don't think too hard about these fucking things, man, really. You just talk.
No, you did good.
Tell stories, man. I got 5 billion stories. If you call me again, there'll be a bunch of different ones. Some of them are even true. But anyway.
Very, very good. Well, this is how things are going to work out. We're about 3 weeks behind on our episodes, but Jeff, the editing wizard over here, will get it all cleaned up, and I'll send it to you, the link to you, and please share it wherever you can. So I'll be in touch with you in about 3 weeks. Sound good?
Good, man. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for the opportunity. It was fantastic.
All right, man. Thanks a lot, guys.
Take care.
Good luck.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Yep.
Everybody hides at home inside their nest of snakes. Everybody grinds the stone and makes their own mistakes. Hide in the headlights, fight the grip of fear. can make your dreams come true, but you just can't do it here. Hey. Everybody eyes the gun and screams inside their head. Everybody bites their tongue and pays their bills instead. Hide in the spotlights, fight the grip of death. You can have the air you need, but you best not take one breath. Hey. Roll the dice. Take your chances. Everybody knows the game is fixed, there is no prize. Everybody pulls the plug and says their last goodbyes. Move to the sunshine, fight the grip of nights. If they ever take from you, then you plug out.